It was Christmas night in Redwood City. A pregnant woman and her young son were being mocked and filmed by rich teens, their table kicked to the ground while the crowd looked away. Then the laughter died. A low, thunderous growl cut through the Christmas music. She looked up to see a battle-scarred German shepherd, and behind him a Navy SEAL who did not look like a man to be ignored. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support truly means the world to us. Cold air wrapped Redwood City in a glittering illusion of warmth, holiday lights reflecting off wet pavement as cheerful music floated through the crowded Christmas shopping street. Emily Carter stood just beyond the brightest stretch of decorations, her body subtly angled inward as if bracing against more than the winter wind. She was 29 years old, visibly pregnant, her belly heavy enough to alter the way she stood and breathed. Slender and worn down by months of quiet stress, she carried exhaustion in the lines beneath her eyes, less from sleepless nights than from constant calculation: rent, food, school, medical bills. One hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, while the other held tightly to her son's small hand. Noah stood close to her side, a thin 7-year-old with wide, watchful eyes. He leaned into his mother's leg, gripping her as if he sensed that letting go, even briefly, might allow the world to take something from them. In front of them stood a narrow wooden table, old and uneven, covered with handmade Christmas ornaments: paper angels, wooden stars, and small wreaths tied with red string. Emily had made them late at night after Noah fell asleep, counting each piece not as decoration, but as a meal, a bus ride, a step closer to the hospital visit she could no longer delay. Every sale mattered, every dollar felt like borrowed time. The street was alive around them. Couples laughed, children pointed excitedly at lights, and the smell of roasted chestnuts drifted through the air. Christmas music played overhead, bright and unyielding. People passed Emily and Noah constantly, close enough to brush past, yet their eyes slid over her table and her rounded belly as if she were part of the pavement. Invisible. Emily forced herself to stand straight, offering quiet smiles, and murmured "Merry Christmas" that went unanswered. She had learned that indifference hurt less than cruelty, most days. Then laughter cut sharply through the music. A group of teenagers pushed forward and stopped directly in front of the table. They moved with careless confidence, untouched by consequence. At their center stood Lucas Grant, 17, tall and lean, dark hair neatly styled, his posture easy and entitled. He lifted his phone without hesitation and aimed it at Emily. "Look at this," he said loudly. "A homeless pregnant woman selling junk on Christmas Eve." His friends laughed. One leaned toward the table, feigning interest. "Guess Santa skipped some houses this year." Humiliation tightened Emily's chest. She shifted instinctively, angling her body to shield her belly and pulling Noah closer. The presence of the camera made it worse, permanent. "Please," she said softly. "I'm just trying to work." Lucas stepped closer, lowering the phone inches from her face. "Work?" he laughed. "This is pathetic." Noah's grip tightened. "Mom," he whispered, fear breaking through his voice. Emily felt the shift, the moment mockery turned into something sharper. Lucas shoved the table hard. Wood scraped violently against the pavement as a leg buckled. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her belly as she staggered backward, heart slamming in panic. For a split second, the lights blurred and the music warped, and she thought she was going to fall. Noah cried out and collided with her legs, clutching her as ornaments spilled across the ground and cracked beneath careless shoes. Laughter erupted, loud and unchecked. Emily barely stayed upright, knees shaking, breath shallow. She wrapped an arm around Noah as he sobbed against her, his small body trembling. Around them, people slowed. Some stared. Some turned away. No one intervened. The Christmas music continued to play. And then, cutting through the noise, came another sound, low, deep, vibrating with something ancient and unmistakable. A sound that did not belong to celebration, one that made the laughter falter mid-breath. It came from somewhere behind them, rolled through the cold air, and settled over the street like a warning. Emily froze, heart pounding, as she turned slightly toward the sound, still unaware of what it was, only knowing that for the first time that night, the space behind her felt far more dangerous than the one in front of her. The sound came again, closer this time, low, resonant, carrying a weight that pressed against the chest before it reached the ears. It was not loud, yet it cut through the Christmas music and laughter with surgical precision. The teenagers froze. Between them and Emily stood a German shepherd, massive and unmistakably alert, his body angled forward, muscles taut beneath a thick sable and black coat. Older and powerfully built, with a faint scar along his muzzle and one ear notched at the tip, he radiated certainty rather than rage. His amber eyes stayed locked on the boys. This was Rex. He did not bark or lunge. He simply stood there, a quiet promise of consequences if anyone took another step. A man stepped forward from behind the dog, his presence as controlled and grounded as the animal at his side. Daniel Brooks was in his mid-30s, tall and solidly built, with broad shoulders and a sharply defined face, high cheekbones, a square jaw shadowed by short stubble, and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. His close-cropped hair showed the first hints of gray at the temples. There was no aggression in him, only readiness, the kind shaped by years of pressure. When he spoke, his voice was calm and low. That's far enough. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. The words landed with finality. Lucas tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out thin. "Control your dog," he muttered, lowering his phone halfway. Daniel's eyes flicked briefly to the device, then back to Lucas. "He's under control," Daniel said evenly. "Are you?" The question hung in the air. Rex took a single step, not toward the boys, but closer to Emily, positioning himself as a barrier. The movement was deliberate, trained. Emily realized the dog wasn't acting out of anger, but choice. He was protecting. Noah stared openly now, fear giving way to awe. The crowd sensed the shift. Conversations faltered. A few people slowed to watch. Lucas's friends exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence cracking. One tugged at his sleeve, murmuring that it wasn't worth it. Lucas hesitated, forced a smirk, then backed away. "Whatever," he said, pocketing his phone. His eyes lingered on Daniel with resentment and confusion before the group retreated into the crowd, their laughter gone, swallowed by the music that never stopped. The danger receded, though the tension lingered. Daniel remained still until he was certain they were gone. Only then did he turn to Emily. Up close, she saw the wear beneath his composure, the faint lines at his eyes, the guarded way he assessed her before speaking. "Are you hurt?" His voice softened. Emily shook her head, though her legs felt weak. "I don't think so." Daniel nodded, accepting her answer. He crouched slightly and met Noah's eyes. "You did good," he said quietly. "Staying with your mom." Rex eased closer and sat, his large frame settling with a soft huff. After a moment's hesitation, Noah reached out and touched the dog's fur. Rex didn't move, only glanced at Daniel, who gave a subtle nod. The street slowly returned to its rhythm, the incident already fading for most. Daniel straightened, relaxing his shoulders only slightly. "They shouldn't have done that," he said. "If you want, I can walk you somewhere safer." Emily studied him, weighing instinct against need. There was no pressure in his offer, only presence. She nodded. I could use that." Without being asked, Daniel helped set the table upright and gathered the unbroken ornaments. Rex stayed close, a silent sentinel. As they prepared to leave, Emily noticed Daniel didn't hurry away once the danger passed. He moved at her pace, attentive to the way she walked, to how Noah leaned into her when exhaustion caught up. Whatever experiences had shaped him had also taught him to stay when others disappeared. The growl that stopped the night was only the beginning. As they stepped away from the brightest lights of Redwood Street, Emily sensed this was not a brief interruption, but the start of something that would follow them into the quieter, more uncertain hours ahead. Emily felt the cold long before she reached the apartment. It clung to her skin, settled into her bones, and blurred the edges of her thoughts until fear and exhaustion became indistinguishable. Daniel did not ask where she lived or how far it was. He simply walked beside her, his pace adjusted to hers without comment, Rex moving quietly at their feet. Noah stayed pressed close to his mother, his small hand locked around hers, as if letting go might cause the night to close in again. The apartment was small and dim, tucked above a row of closed shops. When Emily opened the door, the air inside felt even colder than the street they had left behind. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft echo of their footsteps. Emily hesitated, embarrassed, then stepped aside to let them in. "The heat's been out," she said quietly, as if apologizing for something she had long since stopped expecting to be fixed. The room answered for her, bare walls, thin furniture, a space that held cold the way others held warmth. It felt less like shelter and more like a waiting place. Daniel took it in with a single, efficient glance. He didn't comment on the cold or the condition of the apartment. He set his jacket aside, rolled up his sleeves, and moved toward the heater without being asked. His movements were deliberate, practiced, the kind that came from years of solving problems where hesitation cost time, or worse. He checked the wiring, adjusted a loose panel, tested the switch. Emily watched from a few steps back, one hand resting on her belly, the other gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. She hadn't realized how close she was to collapsing until she stopped moving. As Daniel worked, Rex crossed the room and lay down on the floor near Noah. The dog's size filled the space, but his presence was calm rather than overwhelming. He settled with a low breath, his body warm against the cold floor. Noah stood still for a moment, uncertain, then slowly crouched beside him. His fingers hovered before finally touching the thick fur, tentative at first, then more confident. Rex didn't react beyond a slight shift of his head, allowing the contact. The moment was quiet, fragile, as if both child and dog understood its importance. The heater responded with a dull click, then a strained hum. It wasn't strong, but it was something. Slowly the room began to change. The air softened. The sharp edge of the cold eased. Emily felt it first in her hands, then in her chest, where her breathing finally deepened. Daniel straightened, listening for a moment to be sure the system would hold. "It'll last through the night," he said. His voice was steady, practical. He glanced at Emily. "You should sit." She did. The chair creaked beneath her, but she didn't mind. For the first time since earlier that evening, she allowed herself to stop bracing. Noah shifted closer to Rex, his initial fear replaced by curiosity, then something lighter. A small sound escaped him before he could stop it. A soft laugh, surprised and unguarded. It was brief, almost uncertain, but it was real. Emily froze at the sound. Daniel did too. He turned slightly, just enough to see Noah's face lit by that fleeting smile. For a moment, no one spoke. The heater hummed. Rex remained still. Noah smiled again, smaller this time, but steady. The sound seemed to loosen something in the room, something that had been tightly wound for days. Daniel looked away first, as if giving the moment space. Emily pressed her lips together, emotion rising unexpectedly in her throat. That single laugh felt heavier than all the noise on Redwood Street combined. In that rare pocket of warmth and quiet, Emily felt a decision settle inside her. She looked at Daniel, at the man who had stepped in without questions, who had fixed what he could and stayed long enough to make sure it mattered. She drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. There were things she had carried alone for too long, truth she had buried out of necessity rather than choice. Watching Noah beside Rex, safe and calm for the first time in days, Emily realized she was ready to speak. But not yet. Not tonight. The night had given them warmth. The truth would come next. The room was quiet now, warmed by the uneven hum of the heater and the soft yellow light hanging from the ceiling. Emily sat with both hands resting on her belly, fingers intertwined, as if anchoring herself before speaking. When she finally lifted her eyes to Daniel, there was resolve there, thin but unshakable. Her voice, when it came, was calm in a way that surprised even her. She spoke of her husband first, Mark Carter, a construction worker with strong hands and an easy laugh, the kind of man who came home dusty and tired, but never too exhausted to kneel down and listen to his son's stories. He had been tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and a crooked smile earned from years of hard labor. One morning he had gone to work like any other. By evening he hadn't come home. The accident was brief, violent, and officially labeled unavoidable. The company's representatives were polite, distant, and efficient in denying responsibility. Apologies were offered. Accountability was not. Emily's words tightened as she continued. Without compensation, without savings, everything unraveled quietly. Bills piled up. Legal letters arrived with cold precision. Then she discovered she was pregnant. There was no insurance anymore, no safety net, only appointment slips she couldn't afford to keep and a growing sense of panic she hid behind routine. She mentioned the eviction notice last, folded so many times it barely looked like paper anymore. She didn't cry while telling it. She had done that already, alone, when it hadn't helped. Now she only spoke, laying the truth between them, like something fragile and necessary. Daniel listened without interrupting. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped, his posture attentive but restrained. The light caught the angles of his face, revealing faint scars near his temple and the permanent tension in his jaw. When Emily finished, silence settled again, not awkward, but heavy with understanding. Daniel took a slow breath before speaking. He didn't begin with explanations or sympathy. He simply said, "I'm sorry," and meant it in a way that required no response. Then, almost reluctantly, he spoke of his own loss. A teammate, younger than him, someone who should have made it back. Daniel described the nights that followed, sleep fractured by memories, reflexes that never fully shut off, the constant awareness of exits and shadows. He didn't dwell on details. He didn't need to. Emily recognized the shape of his pain even without the specifics. Rex shifted on the floor, stretching slightly, his age showing in the careful way he moved before settling again near Noah. The dog was no longer alert, only present, his breathing slow and steady. Noah leaned against him, his earlier smile faded into quiet calm, listening without fully understanding. Emily noticed how Daniel's eyes flicked instinctively toward the window when a car passed outside, how his shoulders tensed and released. This was a man shaped by vigilance, by loss that never truly ended. Two different lives, bound for a moment by shared absence, sat facing each other in that small room. The connection felt real, but fragile. Outside, the city continued on, unaware. Phones buzzed. Messages were sent. On the other side of Redwood Street, Richard Grant was finishing a late dinner in his glass-walled home overlooking the city. He was a man in his late 40s, tall and meticulously groomed, with silver beginning to edge his dark hair and a presence sharpened by wealth and influence. He had built his reputation on control, of companies, of narratives, of people. When his son Lucas returned home that night, agitated and defensive, Richard listened with narrowed eyes. A video had been stopped, a scene disrupted, a pregnant woman drawing attention where none was convenient. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His displeasure showed in the tightening of his jaw and the single directive he issued. Find out who she is. Back in the apartment, Emily felt the weight of the night pressing in again, though the room remained warm. Daniel stood, signaling the end of the conversation without cutting it short. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Telling the truth." He didn't promise solutions. He didn't offer rescue. Instead, he gave her something rarer, belief that her story mattered. He glanced once more at Noah and Rex, then toward the door. "I'll check on you," he said. "Soon." Emily nodded, trusting that he would. As Daniel stepped back into the cold, the warmth inside the apartment lingered. Emily sat in the dim light, one hand on her belly, the other resting lightly on Noah's shoulder. She had finally spoken the truth she'd carried alone. But somewhere beyond those thin walls, forces far less forgiving were beginning to notice her existence. The truth had been revealed, and with it came a tension she could not yet see, but would soon feel. Morning came without mercy. The cold was lighter, the sky pale and undecided, but trouble arrived faster than Emily expected. By the time she set her small table back near the edge of Redwood Street, 2 men from the local business association were already waiting. They were polite on the surface, clean coats, clipped voices, but firm in their message. Complaints had been filed, permits questioned. Emily was told she could no longer sell there. The words were delivered as procedure, not accusation, yet the intent was unmistakable. When she asked who had complained, the answer came with a practiced shrug. Disturbance of public order. It sounded official enough to close the conversation. Noah watched silently, his eyes tracking every movement, sensing that something familiar and dangerous was unfolding again. Within minutes, the situation escalated. A patrol car pulled up, lights off but presence loud enough. Officer Paul Hensley stepped out first, early 40s, broad through the shoulders, his face set in the neutral expression of a man trained to keep emotion out of public view. His partner, Officer Maria Lopez, younger and sharper-eyed, followed, her gaze moving quickly from Emily to Noah to the scattered ornaments at their feet. Hensley spoke calmly, explaining that a report had been made, allegations of theft, disorderly conduct. Emily's mouth went dry. She tried to respond, to explain, but her words tangled. Noah's hand slipped into hers, tight and desperate. The crowd gathered again, not hostile, not helpful, just present. Phones stayed mostly down this time, but eyes were everywhere. When Hensley asked for identification, Emily complied, her hands shaking. The accusation felt unreal, heavy, as if it had been dropped on her from above. She saw the handcuffs on his belt and felt her breath shorten. Lopez crouched slightly toward Noah, her voice softer as she asked if he was okay. He nodded without looking up, pressing closer to his mother. Hensley hesitated, glancing at the paperwork on his tablet. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I need you to come with us while we sort this out." The sentence was almost complete when the sound of measured footsteps approached from behind. Daniel's voice cut through the murmurs, calm and unmistakable. "Before you do that," he said, "I'd like to see the evidence." He stepped into view with the same controlled presence as the night before, posture relaxed but unyielding. Rex followed, head low, body steady, the leash loose in Daniel's hand. Daniel nodded to the officers, respectful but firm. "Security cameras," he continued. "This is a busy street. There will be footage." Hensley turned, surprised, assessing Daniel's composure, the dog, the certainty in his tone. Lopez straightened, her attention sharpening. The request was reasonable, procedural, hard to refuse without explanation. As Hensley signaled for a pause, Rex lowered his nose to the ground and moved, slowly, deliberately, away from the table. He stopped near a trash bin by the curb, then a few feet beyond it, his body still, his attention fixed. Daniel watched him, then gestured subtly to Lopez. "That spot," he said quietly. "That's where something doesn't belong." Lopez followed, lifting the edge of the bin liner. Beneath it, partially hidden, was a small pouch containing a handful of coins and folded bills, enough to look suspicious, not enough to make sense. The crowd leaned in, murmurs rising. Hensley frowned, checking timestamps on his device as Lopez photographed the find. "This wasn't here earlier," someone muttered. Another voice added, "I saw that kid, Lucas, standing right there." The name carried. Hensley stiffened. "Grant?" he asked. A few heads nodded. Phones came out now, cautiously, as the narrative began to shift. Daniel didn't gloat or raise his voice. He simply stood where he was, letting process do what intimidation could not. Hensley requested camera access from the nearest shop. Minutes later, footage played on a small screen. Lucas near the table earlier, his movements quick, his hand dropping briefly near the bin. The angle wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The accusation against Emily thinned, then dissolved. Lopez returned the handcuffs to Hensley's belt. "We're done here," she said quietly. Across town, Richard Grant received the call in his office, glass walls reflecting a city he believed he owned. He listened without interruption, his face composed, jaw tight. When the call ended, he set the phone down with deliberate care. Control had slipped in public. Attention had turned. He did not rage. He recalibrated. Back on Redwood Street, Hensley apologized, formally, briefly, and told Emily she was free to go. The crowd dispersed with embarrassed speed. Daniel knelt once to Noah's level. "You did nothing wrong," he said. Noah nodded, eyes bright, relief washing over fear. When the street finally emptied, Emily realized her knees were trembling. Daniel steadied the table without comment. Rex sat at her side, calm as ever. The morning resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted. The rich had tried to remain unseen and failed. As Emily packed her ornaments, she understood that the truth had not only cleared her name, it had drawn a line, one that others would notice, and not all of them would accept it quietly. Richard Grant moved quickly once the public narrative began to slip beyond his control. He requested a private meeting, discreet and efficient, arranged through an intermediary who spoke in the smooth cadence of someone accustomed to closing problems rather than confronting them. The office where they met overlooked the city from several floors up. Glass walls, polished surfaces, a view designed to remind visitors where power resided. Richard sat behind a wide desk, immaculate as ever. Tailored suit, silver threaded neatly into his dark hair, a face disciplined into calm. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He offered. The sum was mentioned once casually, as if discussing a routine expense. Enough to make the trouble disappear. Enough to remind Daniel that most battles ended the same way. Daniel listened without interrupting, his posture still, his expression unreadable. When the offer ended, he shook his head. "No," he said. The word was quiet, final. It landed harder than an argument ever could. The refusal unsettled Richard more than anger would have. He leaned back, studying Daniel with a practiced smile that no longer reached his eyes. "You don't have to be involved," he said. "This can all be simplified." Daniel met his gaze steadily. "It already is," he replied. "What happened was wrong. Money doesn't change that." There was no threat in his tone, no moral grandstanding, only certainty. Daniel rose to leave, pausing once at the door. "You should speak to your lawyer," he added. "Not to me." Outside, the city noise rushed back in, grounding and ordinary. Rex waited patiently at his side, tail still, eyes alert. Daniel felt the familiar clarity settle in, the one he trusted when choices mattered. Within days, the story shifted from whispers to headlines. A local reporter, Helen Price, began asking questions, careful ones. She was in her late 30s, sharp-featured, with dark hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. Helen had built her reputation on persistence rather than spectacle, and she followed paper trails the way others chased quotes. Public records, complaint logs, camera footage. She found inconsistencies too clean to be accidental. When she approached Emily, she did so gently, explaining what she had uncovered and what she still needed. Emily hesitated, then agreed. The interview was brief and factual, no embellishment, just dates, documents, and the truth she had already learned to tell without apology. As the article ran, pressure mounted. Richard's name appeared not as an accusation, but as a question, one that demanded answers. Sponsors called. Advisors cautioned restraint. His legal team recommended silence. Richard complied, issuing a statement that acknowledged misunderstandings while denying intent. It was enough to stall, but not to erase. Meanwhile, the charges against Emily were formally dismissed. The police issued a written correction. The business association reversed its decision. Apologies arrived in cautious language. Emily's name was cleared, her reputation restored in the only way that mattered, on record. When she read the notice, her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but release. Daniel watched from the edges, intervening only where necessary. He helped connect Emily with legal aid. Quiet referrals, no fanfare. He answered a reporter's question once, briefly, refusing to center himself in the story. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about what's right." Rex became a familiar presence around the neighborhood, recognized now not as a threat, but as a guardian. Children waved, adults nodded. The shift was subtle, but real. Power had tried to move unseen and failed. Process had prevailed, not because it was dramatic, but because it was patient. Yet Daniel understood the limits of victory. Clearing a name did not pay bills. Public sympathy did not fix a broken system overnight. He visited Emily that evening, the apartment warmer now, the space changed by small improvements and borrowed time. Noah greeted Rex with a confidence that would have seemed impossible days earlier. Emily listened as Daniel explained what had happened, what had been offered, what had been refused, what had followed. She thanked him, her voice steady. He shook his head. "You told the truth," he said. "That's what mattered." There was gratitude in her eyes, but also something else, resolve, tempered by realism. Outside, the city settled into evening. Daniel stood to leave, pausing by the door as he often did, checking the hallway out of habit. He looked back once, taking in the scene. A mother no longer under accusation, a child safe, a dog at ease. Justice had held for now. But as he stepped into the night, Daniel knew the path ahead for Emily would still be long. Medical appointments, work, uncertainty. Justice could win a day. It could not guarantee a future. That would require something quieter and harder, time, support, and choices made again and again. He resolved, without ceremony, not to disappear. Spring arrived quietly, without ceremony, the way healing often does. The trees along Redwood Street budded again, the damp air softening into something gentler, and with it came a day Emily would remember for the rest of her life. The delivery was long and exhausting, but uncomplicated. When it was over, she lay back against white pillows, breath shaky with relief, her newborn resting against her chest, small, warm, alive. The months of fear and uncertainty fell away in that moment. Noah stood beside the bed, taller somehow, his eyes wide with wonder as he reached out to touch his sibling's tiny hand. The room held a calm that had once seemed impossible. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a small miracle had just taken place inside a quiet hospital room. Life did not transform overnight, but it steadied. Noah transferred to a new school not far from home, a place where teachers knew his name and classmates did not whisper when he walked by. The tension that once lived in his shoulders eased, replaced by an easy confidence that showed itself in laughter that came more often now, unguarded and bright. Emily noticed the change in small ways, how he spoke more freely at the dinner table, how he slept through the night without calling out. Rex became a familiar presence on the block, no longer the imposing guardian from that Christmas night, but a quiet fixture of safety. Neighbors greeted him with smiles. Children waved as he passed. Someone had started calling him the hero dog, a name that embarrassed Emily more than pleased her, but she accepted it because it meant something deeper. People remembered what had happened, and they remembered who had stood between harm and the vulnerable. Daniel visited when he could, always without announcement, never staying longer than needed. He remained the same, reserved, attentive, present without intrusion. He watched from the edges as Emily adjusted to motherhood again, as Noah found his footing, as Rex settled into a routine that no longer required vigilance at every sound. Yet beneath Daniel's calm ran a familiar undercurrent. His leave was ending. Orders waited, responsibilities that could not be postponed forever. The knowledge sat with him quietly, shaping his days, reminding him that moments like these were finite. He did not speak of it until the time came. The morning he told Emily, the light was soft and pale, lingering as if reluctant to leave. Daniel stood near the doorway of the apartment, his posture relaxed, but his expression serious. He explained simply. Duty called, and he would be gone for a while. Emily nodded, understanding without surprise. She had always known this moment would arrive. What surprised her was what came next. Daniel reached into his pocket and set a key on the table between them. For emergencies, he said, and for everything else. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a practical one, but it carried weight. Then he looked at her, steady and sincere. I'll come back. No promises of timelines, no guarantees, just a statement grounded in intention. When he left, there were no tears, only a quiet sense of continuation. Emily stood at the window with Noah, watching Daniel walk down the steps with Rex at his side, their figures growing smaller against the street they had once crossed together, in fear. The apartment felt fuller than it ever had, not because everything was solved, but because something essential had taken root there. Trust, resilience, hope that did not depend on illusion. Emily returned to her routines with a steadiness that surprised even her, carrying forward what had been given without clinging to it. As summer edged closer, the Christmas decorations from months before were packed away, yet their memory lingered. The lights that once glittered against wet pavement remained in Emily's mind, not as decoration, but as a symbol of a night that changed the course of her life. She understood now that kindness didn't always arrive loudly or stay forever. Sometimes it came, did what it needed to do, and left behind the tools to continue. On quiet evenings, when the apartment was filled with the sounds of breathing and distant traffic, Emily felt gratitude not for rescue, but for the chance to stand again on her own feet. On Redwood Street, the seasons turned as they always had. People forgot details, names, headlines. But some things endured. A mother who learned she was not invisible. A child who learned the world could be safe again. A dog who lay calmly in the sun, watchful but at peace. And a man who carried the certainty that, even in a harsh world, doing the right thing mattered, whether anyone was watching or not. The Christmas lights faded from storefronts, but they did not go out. They lived on in memory, and in the quiet, stubborn hope that kindness once sparked could keep burning long after the night had passed. Sometimes, miracles don't come as thunder from the sky. They come quietly, through a stranger who stops, a loyal dog who protects, a moment of kindness sent by God at the exact right time. In life, we may be praying for a miracle, or we may be the miracle God sends to someone else. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to support stories that heal and inspire. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and keep His light shining in your life. Amen.